Hello?
All right. Welcome to our October Garden Gamers monthly check-in. All you garden gamers out there, I know some of you RSVP'd saying that you couldn't make it. Thank you for doing that, Amanda. Um, and Lois, you had some questions about deer, but you weren't sure whether you could make it. So we are recording this with your questions and Emmy Fernandez's questions in mind regarding the deer that ruined your summer garden. So here goes. I've researched the conditions for both the Pacific Northwest coast and the Atlantic Northwest coast. So what is the best deer deterrent? The best deer deterrent, in my opinion, are fences. And I think most people will say this to be true. We also fought with deer the first year of our growing, but then we quickly put up a fence, and everything within the fence does not get browsed, and everything outside the fence occasionally gets browsed. But there are things that don't get browsed outside the fence. So if you have a smaller plot, for instance, you are not, you don't have a huge garden, you can use metal fences and cage up your beds, especially if they're square foot gardens, just like one of the garden gamers did to prevent cats from getting in. And the key to that is to make sure that, the fence has to be 5 foot tall at least. And then it doesn't have to have a fence on top, like a cat box would. Like one of the garden gamers did a cat. I think Nancy Wilson did the cat fence on the top. But for the deer fence, 5 feet metal fences with the green stakes would probably do it for your square foot garden. And another option would be, if you have a large area, would be living fences. And willow, the willow plant makes a lovely, beautiful living fence that can deter deer. Or you could grow hedgerows of berries that act as a trap crop for deer. So here's an example of a willow fence where they have just plugged in some willow. Of course, this takes some time to grow, so it won't be up to the first year. But over time, this fence just gets thicker and thicker and more beautiful. Other deer deterrents that are plants, and you might want to take notes from this screen, and I've taken this from various sources, but permaculturenews.org has several topics of deer-resistant plants or trees. And one of them says that alliums, generally deer don't like alliums, and any aromatic culinary herbs like oregano, sage, chives, garlic, pepper.
So the only thing I want to add here is that I think I've mentioned this before, that if there's significant population pressure, so that there's too many deer for the amount of grazing that the deer can naturally find in your area, then they will eat things that they don't normally eat. So there's always the exceptional cases where deer eat things that people have sworn they can't stand eating. So that's why we kind of recommend using a fence instead of some of these deterrent plants.
Yeah, historically, deer populations were controlled by man because they would use the deer skin, right? The Indians, the American Indians, and deer meat in their diet. So if we go back to that, that's the ideal. But if you do not, depending on the laws in your state as well, or your county, whether you can shoot deer or whether you'd like to eat deer, that's another matter. So if you have, since not many deer seem to be crowded out in the suburbs now, that's what we're finding, is that they're eating more and more of the things that they normally wouldn't eat out of desperation.
The other thing you can do is stack functions. So you can make a edible living fence. So if you grow caning berries, for example, like a blackberry or raspberry, and you grow them really close together, or you grow a what they call like a thicket type tree, like a American hazelnut that tends to produce very thick roots where it'll send up seedlings from the roots, and you plant a fence like that, then you'll get some harvest. Plus, you'll deter the deer because they can't really cross that. The only thing is, it takes some time to establish that. So you would probably want to still put some kind of temporary fence next to your living fence as a reinforcement.
Right. So on this page are what historically people found deer don't like. And especially in the Pacific Northwest, the flowers that are listed down there, the Campanula, Bellflower, Flordalis, that comes from Better Home and Garden, with specific for the Pacific Northwest weather, since you are from there, Lois. And then as for trees, they say they don't like fig, ginkgo biloba, persimmon, pawpaw, honey locust, and sugar maple. Other sprays that might help, they don't like aromatics, and they don't like rotten eggs, garlic sprays, and cayenne pepper, they said. But of course, the smell from that, the odor from that, doesn't last as long as you would like. So if you have a smaller area, that might work better, and that's another option too. I think that was the end of my slides for possibilities. Did you have anything else to add, Dave, about?
Yeah, I think Amanda had a question about aphids that attacked her herb spiral. So I think I would just quickly cover that. So for those of you who don't know what aphids are, they're these tiny little, they can be green, white, or black bugs. And they typically will hang out on the leaves of plants. They attack a lot of different plants, but what they're trying to do is suck the sap of the plant and get the nutrients from they're not actually trying to get the sugars from the plant, but they're trying to get all the extra starch from the plant. So even though they tend to reproduce quickly, they're pretty fragile. So the best way to deal with aphids is really to have beneficial insects that you've attracted to your garden, because they love nothing better than to chomp down on aphids. So we have this game called Bug Hunt. Let me see if I can I share?
Yes, you can share. Let me see if I have the possibility to share.
Can you see that?
Yes, I see it.
Okay, so if you go to the Bug Hunt, it's under the game map. I think Nikki sent out a link before. We have a lot of information, and it's kind of a little gamey thing, but it's also a great educational resource. So you can see all these different bugs that you might encounter in your garden. The red, if it's surrounded by a red border, then they're typically pests in your garden. If it's surrounded by a green border, then they're usually beneficial insects. So I'll just go to the aphid section here. And you get points if you uploaded a photo of these aphids. But you can see here's a typical picture of the aphids. There's probably hundreds on this single leaf. Click on the picture, you get a little bit of information. about the aphid. And then if you click the next arrow, then you get some information about which beneficial insects will help you, and some other treatments that you can apply. So in terms of the beneficial insects, the ones that you're trying to attract for aphids are ladybugs and lacewings. The lacewing larvae eat something like 20 to 30 aphids a day, but you really want to attract ladybugs because they can eat something like 60 of them a day. So all you need is maybe like a half dozen ladybugs, and you won't really have an aphid problem anymore. Now, if you have a new garden, you might not have the beneficial insects, or you don't have room for any pollinators, plants that would attract ladybugs. Then you can also treat them organically. So one thing, aphids are pretty sensitive to rain, so you can just hose down your susceptible plants occasionally. If you do it daily for a couple of weeks, then that should reduce the population a lot. Another thing you can do is you can coat it with a diluted solution of neem oil, which will also keep the aphids off. But you have to be careful, because if you apply neem oil in too strong a concentration, then it'll actually burn the leaves. So it's this fine balance between applying enough to remove the aphids but not kill the plant. So that's about all I have to say about aphids.
No, that's great. Thank you, Dave.
I'll stop sharing now.
I will share troops the picture of the aphid again in Fidelity. So here is that a picture again of what aphids look like, and their main predator is actually the friendly ladybug. So check out the bug hunt, and I think, and go through. I just encourage you guys to just go through the modules, even though it is late in the season. Depending on where you are in the States, if you can go through them still. We are closing the game next month, and we hope to see you online then, just to answer any questions and celebrate your wins and prepare for next year. So this is truly growing in the true sense. You're growing food, but you're also growing learning, and each of us are growing, you and I. So the growing learning experience. Thanks for being with us at the Garden Game, and we will see you again next month for the garden check-in. So,
I could throw one last thing in.
okay.
It's what are you growing? Kind of a shout out question. Is what everybody is harvesting, growing now. So we're in Virginia, Northern Virginia, which is Zone 7A. So we're about to harvest our sweet potatoes. And if you do have sweet potatoes in your garden, you can also save the leaves by treating them like spinach, basically blanching them and then freezing them immediately afterward. Now is a pretty good time to pick your sweet potatoes, but you've also got to cure them for about 2 weeks in the sun after you pick them. You should be kind of winding down on your summer crops, so you should be cutting back your tomatoes. If you're in the same kind of drought as us, we're about to cut back our squash, our peppers, eggplant, and now I'm kind of already put a lot of my fall/winter crops in. So now's a good time to transplant lettuce. It's a great time to put in allium. So by alliums, I mean garlic, leek, pumpkin onions, shallots, anything that's in the onion family, because all onions are biennials, so they are usually hardy enough to survive any kind of winter, and then they'll grow much bigger in the spring. Now it's a good time also. I have a whole crop of beets that are growing well. Other plants that are pretty hardy that you can overwinter include kale. Sorry. Okay, so I've mumbled enough.
No, no, perfect. No, thank you so much, Dave, for sharing your wisdom, as always. And I have to catch up to you in my garden chores. But right now, most of what I'm doing garden-wise is seed saving because it's the end of the season and I want to make sure that the best harvested crops will be there for us next year. So I've been harvesting uh, squash seeds and beans and tomatoes, peppers, and the ones that the ones that were really productive for us, the varieties that were really productive for us. It may be different for you guys where you live, what do well. So I'd love to know what those are as well. Okay, so shall we sign off from here?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.